All right, everyone, it is 7 o'clock, so we can get started. We have a full agenda, so let's do it. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2025, this meeting of the school committee will be conducted via hybrid participation. We will post an audio recording, audio-video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of these proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the City of Somerville website and local cable access government channels. Dr. Carmona, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Ms. Barish,
Here.
Eleanor, Mayor Ballantyne,
Present.
President Pineda Nufo,
Here.
Mr. Green,
Here.
Mr. Biton,
Here.
Ms. Biton, Dr. Ackman,
Here.
Dr. Phillips, and Chair Crepton.
Here.
We have quorum.
All right, we will start with a moment of silence and a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we will start with introducing our interpreters. Do we have all of our interpreters? Okay. So Spanish, if you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Good evening, my name is Vivian O'Toole and I will be your Spanish interpreter for tonight. Buenas noches, mi nombre es Vivian O'Toole y voy a ser su intérprete el día de hoy. Para escuchar esta reunión, por favor haga clic en el globo que se encuentra en la parte inferior de su pantalla y elija la opción español. Gracias.
And Portuguese.
Good evening, my name is Vanusa Teixeira. I will be your Portuguese interpreter for tonight. Boa noite, meu nome é Vanusa Teixeira, eu serei seu intérprete de português esta noite. Para ouvir esta reunião, clique no globo na parte inferior da sua tela e selecione português.
And Haitian Creole.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Angie Supri. I'll be a Haitian Creole interpreter for the night. Bonsoir tout le monde. Mon nom c'est Angie Supri. Ma fait traduction pour nous à soir. Si vous besoin créole haïtien, tapez regarder en bas page, on a pris un globe, cliquez sur lui, choisissez français pour créole haïtien. Merci.
All right, thank you. And we will start with our student advisory reps. Do we have them here on Zoom? We do not. Okay, if they arrive, will you let me know? And we'll jump back to that. Okay, that brings us to public comment. Welcome and thank you to those who signed up for public comment. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to present their material. However, the chair may limit comments to 2 minutes based on the number of individuals signed up to speak. We have 6 people signed up, so I will give everyone the 3 minutes. Speakers should begin their comments by stating their name and address, or in the case of district employees, their role within the district. The chair of the meeting, after a warning, reserves the right to terminate speech which is not constitutionally protected because it constitutes true threats that are likely to provoke a violent reaction and cause a breach of the peace, or incitement to imminent lawless conduct, or which contains obscenities. Public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between the public and the committee. Members of the committee will not reply to public comment in the course of the meeting, though individual members may follow up and items from public comment may be taken up in future meetings. The school committee will not hear personal complaints of school personnel nor against any member of the school committee in public session. Individuals may address topics on the agenda or items within the school committee's scope of responsibility, such as the district budget, goals, and policies, or role as superintendent. The public is encouraged to submit comments in writing for inclusion in the public record. So I will read 3 names at a time just so you know when it's coming up. So we have Jess Perez Adams, then Natty Hoffman, and then Eric Ludwig. So Jess Adams, want to come up first? The floor is yours.
Hello. Hi. There's usually a clock. I'm sorry.
She's about to set it up.
Okay. Hi, my name is Jessica Perez Adams. I am a mom of 3 girls in Somerville Public Schools, 2 of them diagnosed neurodivergent, 1 very likely. I'm here tonight to say thank you, Mrs. Mayor, members of SPS, and the school committee for having these public meetings and allowing us to speak, but I also wanted to say thank you for protecting our immigrant communities and our LGBTQ students. I think it's wonderful coming from a state where these rights and these children weren't protected to have a city and a public school system so dedicated to equity, especially for these populations. I also stand before you, not as just a voice of one, but as a voice of many parents, many students, educators I've spoken with, just so many people who believe that every child, regardless of their ability, deserves dignity, opportunity, and excellence in education. Justice in education is not a privilege. Equity is not a privilege. It's a right. They're both rights. And yet here in Somerville, we see a budget process that, through their drafting, left out the CPAC, which is there to keep them accountable. Having CPAC not involved with that process, it's a right protected by state law, and CPAC was not invited, not consulted, not heard. We were told as special education parents, don't worry, the federal budget covers 80% of our school budget. But I ask you, what happens when that 80% is threatened? What happens if the Department of Education is gutted under this administration? Will we be left scrambling with no plan, no safety net, and no accountability? We cannot be content with a budget that's unclear, unexamined, unitemized, being released to the public. Transparency is not optional. It's the foundation of public trust. And we cannot be told that our children receive enough when there is no gifted program in this city, when twice exceptional students, those with both disabilities and advanced abilities, are overlooked and left struggle in a system that doesn't see who they are. And enough is not enough when legal fees from SPS are draining funds that should be spent on direct services when out-of-district placements are climbing because our programs are failing to meet student needs. Dr. King once said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Injustice in our budget and toward our children is a threat to justice in our classrooms, in our homes, and in the future of every child who dares to dream beyond the limits placed upon them. Thank you.
Okay. Next, I have Natty Hoffman, and then Eric Ludwig, and then Kevin Foster. Natty, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Natty Hoffman, and I'm a Ward 7 resident. Artistic experiences can be transformative for a child. I've seen it with my own 2 boys. So I was thrilled that we were able to send all second grade kids to see the Library Lion live performance this year, a performance of the very same book that they were reading in class. A group of Somerville residents started a community initiative to obtain the funds to enable sending the kids to the show. Dozens of parents donated. I'm here to thank the Somerville Public Schools for collaborating to achieve this goal, especially Tanya Connor of the Media Center. Just to clarify, I'm not connected to Adam Theater in any formal way, other than as basically a super fan. I learned about this new children's theater in Boston in the fall when it put on the Library Lion performance for over 700 Boston public school kids in the main Boston Public Library. What this nonprofit achieved is extraordinary because just a little more than a year before that, it didn't even exist. I immediately thought that our Somerville kids should be able to see this show too, and I'm happy that we made it happen. Here is some feedback we received after the show from a second grade Somerville teacher. I learned that for most of the kids in my class, it was their first time ever seeing a play. Seeing their huge smiles, hearing their audible gasps during set changes, and watching them talking about the performance for hours after the show was such an incredible experience. The play made such an impact. From a parent, my son is on the autism spectrum and nonverbal. The teachers and I were skeptical going in as to how he would do for the show, but he loved it. He was giggling and happy the whole show. The show will return to Boston next January, and I hope that together we can continue to give the kids unique and wonderful experiences such as this one. Thank you so much, and I brought a little bit more about the Library Lion show if any one of you is interested in looking at it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Next, I have Eric Ludwig, then Kevin Foster, and then Liz Eldridge. Eric, the floor is yours.
Good evening. My name is Eric Ludwig. I live on Berkeley Street in Ward 3. I have 2 children. I volunteer weekly at the Argenziano and have since they started going there, and I also volunteer with Somerville Youth Soccer. I'm not here to talk about those things. I'm here because I'm part of the organizing committee with the group Safe Schools Somerville, and I've been working to limit police presence in Somerville Public Schools for the past 4 years. Many of you have heard me give many public comments, but great to see some new faces here as well. Our group has been hearing that there may be efforts to bring back the SRO, the school resource officer, into an on-site role in the high school. This is deeply concerning to us for a few reasons. Number one, this runs counter to all the evidence that we have about how to keep our students and staff safe. 2, this runs counter to the recommendations of the Special Policing Subcommittee the recommendations that they provided to this body based on their years-long deliberations. 3, this runs counter to the direct guidance of this body to the superintendent. And 4, in this macro-political climate, in a sanctuary city, in a city in which we have witnessed the violence of ICE removing children from our schools, this is an irresponsible abdication of our responsibility to keep all of our children safe, especially in our vulnerable groups. We heard conversation before about equity and the commitment that this district has made to specifically immigrants and LGBTQ communities. These lovely emails that I get as a parent, those are fantastic. We cannot be the cause of the violation of those by bringing police and the carceral state back into our schools. We know that there are ways for our schools to communicate and coordinate with our police department. We know that we do not need on-site police. We know that we have, in the MOU guidance, outlined 3 specific reasons for police to be on site. We do not need them there beyond those. We also know that high school students in multiple high school student-driven surveys over the years have expressed their unsafety with having an SRO on site. We know that the school district also has been unable to provide data about police-student interactions, neither data from the district nor data from the police. And the district in past conversations, right, I don't want to hold this body accountable, but in past conversations, it was unclear if the district knew how to get that data out of the police department or of their own records. We also know that ICE is stepping in to arrest, imprison, and deport individuals, including children, and is relying on local law enforcement for their collaboration. We can clearly anticipate that this reliance will become forced compliance, not in our city. So beyond our work at Safe School Somerville of just bringing these issues to public light, we also are continuing our work with state and national juvenile justice and legal experts. So, you know, as you may remember, we drafted an MOU and delivered that to folks. We continue to stand here as a partner and are happy to bring those legal experts to the table for direct or facilitated conversation.
I'm afraid your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next I have Kevin Foster, then Liz Eldridge, and then Holly Simeone.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin Foster. I live at 30 Walnut Street. I'm speaking tonight on the same topic as Eric and just encouraging this body to continue to follow the current MOU and the guidelines that this body has done a lot of work over the last 4 years to make. We don't need more police in schools. We need more resources and more care. Thanks so much.
Okay, next I have Liz Eldridge and then Holly Simeone.
Hi, good evening. My name is Liz Eldridge. I see a lot of familiar faces here. I am the chair of Somerville Special Education Parents Advisory Council, also known as the CPAC. I'm here today on behalf of CPAC officers to express our sincere appreciation for Mr. Batone, and who heard our community's concerns and swiftly reached out to CPAC for collaboration and feedback on a resolution to support people with disabilities in Somerville Public Schools, an issue that directly impacts our special education community, which we will all hear a bit more about later. For many months, CPAC has consistently engaged with the district, advocating to uphold our legally mandated advisory and participatory role. This opportunity, extended by Mr. Batone, represents a meaningful step in CPAC fulfilling that role. We are truly grateful for this community-centered collaboration and remain confident that moving forward, special education voices will be at the table as a regular presence. This experience has reinforced that CPAC should continue to advocate for upholding our advisory and participatory role, as we have much work to do. This resolution is an example of the first step in the right direction, and we are hopeful that this positive experience is indicative of a future where collaboration is viewed as an asset that ultimately benefits all students, educators, families, and community members. Thank you for your time this evening, your future collaboration, and commitment to some of our most vulnerable learners, our special education students. Thank you.
Okay, and finally, I have Holly Simeone. The floor is yours.
Hello, thank you. My name is Holly Simeone. I am a lifelong resident of Ward 4. I'm also a proud graduate of Somerville High School. I have 2 daughters who were also educated in the city, and I am here tonight as the chair of the Somerville Commission for Persons with Disabilities. We met earlier this evening to discuss the impact of the lawsuit that is going on to eliminate the protections of the 504, of which we were offered to collaborate on the resolution. We have voted unanimously in favor of the resolution that is before you today, and we are very proud of all of the work that is being done at the school committee level for all of our students, as well as with those who are a part of the CPAC. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to share our support tonight. And I would just like to add that the lawsuit not only would eliminate the rights of disabled persons in education, but also in housing, in healthcare, and in employment. And we will be working with other members of our elected officials to produce other proclamations, so that we will always support all persons with disabilities in the community, regardless of what happens with these lawsuits. So thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. Okay, that concludes public comment. That brings us to the report of the superintendent. Dr. Cremona?
Thank you, Chair. So good evening, everyone, and thank you to all the families who are here tonight, sharing your thoughts, concerns, and questions. We know that this is part of what makes a democracy and a healthy district, so thank you. I am also thrilled that we're going to start this meeting tonight with some amazing folks that we have here that will be sharing a lot of information about their schools. And I'm hoping that everyone has been rejuvenated by the winter break. So tonight we have an important agenda that highlights major themes from our strategic plan. And as part of our strategic plan, we are going to double down on our commitment to equity, access, and academic excellence. And to that end, we will hear from Director of Health Services, Liz Quarantillo, about our plans to expand the number of students who have access to free menstrual products in our school buildings. Next, I'm excited to announce our first school improvement plan presentations of the year. What we call the SIPs are a crucial part of our data-driven decision-making process and reflect our ongoing focus on our strategic priorities, such as academic excellence, equity, and access. Tonight, you will hear from Principal Sarah Wall from the Healy, as well as Principal Felix Caraballo from the Capuana School. And a huge thank to Sam Elegine, our Director of Data and Accountability, and to Dr. Jessica Boston Davis, and all our amazing school principals who have led the way on these efforts. Continuing on themes of academic excellence and equity and access, I want to highlight the upcoming work of our early education and special education departments, who are organizing 2 preschool screenings on February 26th and April 30th. These free and optional screenings are for Somerville residents ages 3 to 5 years old. The screenings help us identify children who may need extra support for educational success, and a special thanks to our EEC Director, Kathleen Baylor, for taking the lead in organizing and marketing this important work for our children. For further information, you please can access this information in our special education website. I also want to highlight our focus on innovation as a major pillar of academic excellence. I'm excited to know that Somerville High School robotics team is competing for the first time this season in Salem, New Hampshire on Saturday and Sunday, and in Revere the following week. Students designed, built, and are currently refining a remote control robot that drives, climbs, and does precision work with objects. We wish our team the best of luck and can't wait to see how they do. Check SPS social media for ways to watch the competition in person or remotely. Thank you to the staff, volunteers, parents, and all of those who made it possible. And thank you to the body as well. With that, let's get started with our presentations. So the first presentation on the accessibility of menstrual products has been an issue that we have heard a lot from the community, especially from this body as well. And I'm happy to introduce the team behind the expansion in equity and access for our students, Director of Health Services, Elizabeth Quarantillo, Liz Quarantillo, and Supervisor for Health and Physical Education, Nicole Vieli. These two have been working around the clock to keep our students healthy, active, and safe throughout the school year. So Liz and Nicole, please, the floor is yours.
I don't think so. Hi, I'm Liz Quartiello, Director of School Health Services, and I am so happy to be here and not talking about COVID. And I did a very quick public health update. I wasn't sure if you were looking for just a sort of basic what's happening disease-wise in the schools. So very briefly, Crystal, if you can do the next slide. Well, that's about who we are. We've been here for over 20 years in various roles throughout the district. And the next slide. Okay, so what we're seeing in the schools, of course, every winter we see a lot of respiratory illness. This year we're also having some GI diseases, norovirus, but also other kinds of GI diseases. It's pretty typical. Next slide, please, Crystal. So I did look to compare this year to last year because, as everybody knows, this has been a very bad flu year. I think everyone knows somebody who's had flu. But I do want to say the remarkable thing is it's almost exactly the same numbers as last year. There hasn't been a huge change. What is interesting is we've actually had more people out sick this year and last year, or not out sick, more people absent this year and last year than we did during January and February during the height of the pandemic. So I don't know how to explain this. We have about a third more absences this year and last year in January and February than we did in 22 and 23. So I'm not sure why yet. I'm still puzzling over it. Next slide. So now we'll really get into what I believe everybody wants to hear from us about access to period supplies in our schools. And we're very committed to ensuring that our kids have access to the supplies they need. There's been so much conversation about this on the state level, providing access to period products for free, because it is a basic human need. It's not just a women's issue or a health issue, it's just a basic human need. And this is something that we need in our bathrooms, the way we need toilet paper and paper towels, and we are very committed to making sure it happens.
Sorry, I'm a lot shorter. Good evening, everyone. I'm Nicole Vieli. I'm the supervisor for health and physical education. Just to give you a little bit of a background, when the high school opened in 2021, there was no access to supply in our 40-plus bathrooms. At that time, we realized that students were missing a lot of learning by going from, say, for example, the 5th floor to the 1st floor to the nurse's office to get supplies. So in that year, DPW installed 10 dispensers in our 7 community restrooms and then 3 in gender-neutral restrooms. And the dispensers and supplies were offered to students for free, and they were purchased from the facilities budget. In SY24, supply was also purchased from the facilities budget. And then this past year for the high school budget purchased supply. How we made this accessible to students is we put it in our X block slides so students could find out where to go in those the 10 bathrooms that had supply. In SY24, West Somerville made it known to me that they did not have any supply in their schools, and they received their product from PTA and donations. And then I decided to put out a survey to school administration to find out if there were dispensers in buildings, where they got supply, if they had any, and then also wanted to find out if they had it, who was paying for it. And so what we found out is that all the schools had machines, and there was no supply at any of the schools with the exception of West Somerville and their donations. And also impacting the nurses' offices. They had supply, but they traditionally keep supply for emergencies, so it wasn't supply all the time and easily accessible. So in November of 2024, a group of Healy students presented to myself, Liz, the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, and the chief of staff about their concerns around lack of supply, also the physical play of the bathrooms at the Healy, time on learning, and issues to access. So what we have done since then is all schools are now supplied with product, and the dispensers are filled. Including the 10 at the high school. We realized that there was not one at the Next Wave and Full Circle, so we have ordered a dispenser for there. All K-8s have dispensers, and they were installed actually pre-pandemic, but the East Somerville one was broken, so we have a new one on order for them.
They're coming tomorrow. Install it.
And then we also realized the importance of having supply in gender-neutral restrooms, so we have ordered dispensers for all, well, not all gender-neutral restrooms, but one in each of the buildings. In the slides, it includes just kind of like what our dispensers look like and where you'll see them and how we went about getting them for students. Moving forward, we have met with the Director of Health and Human Services to explore ways to collaborate. So the City of Somerville actually has a program in some of their public buildings. And so we all agree that this is probably something that should go on with joint resources and join our resources between the school department and the City of Somerville. And, you know, just to reiterate, this is not necessarily a health issue, it's a human need issue, just like toilet paper and paper towels. So.
All right, thank you so much. Ms. Pinheiro-Ufeld and then Mr. Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I'm the president of Somerville City Council, so this came up as well in our meeting, and my understanding is the question is around the types of products. So I just saw in that one photo, there's one tampon size and one maxi pad size. Is that right, or are they various sizes?
Can you go back to the slide that shows the machines?
Yes. Yes. Is that what we're purchasing, one size?
Yes. Yep.
And is there a way to have a variety of sizes available to our students?
No. So I think what's a little bit complicated about this is that we've got to have certain products that fit the machines. So if we want to refill these machines, they're a standard size. So there's a pad with wings, I think are the ones we bought, and then it's a standard size tampon that comes in the cardboard kind of wrapper so that it can go down in the machine. What I will say is that the feedback that I have gotten from the nurses is that in elementary school, and we've also noticed in the brief time that we've had baskets of supplies out, in elementary schools, they are not using tampons. Like, we could have a case that would sit there for a year. So it just is not as popular a product. However, we have them. They are in the machines. The nurses also have them. Sometimes students have asked the nurses about how to use them. So it's a topic, but they really are not used as much. So we have just sort of your standard pads that come in a little box. The machine on the right is what's called the EvoGen machine. That's in all the elementary schools. except for Winter Hill, because the Edgerly building used to have a rec program, so it was one of the city's sites. So they have the Aunt Flo machine, which we think is a better machine because it doesn't have a battery, it doesn't have 2 locks, there's less to break. It just is sort of a better machine. But yeah, there aren't different sizes that we can provide. We have to provide what the machine requires.
Can I ask follow-up questions? I'm sorry, I don't understand the mechanics of the machine. I understand that for tampons, the way they're shaped. For a pad, it seems, I'm confused why we couldn't have smaller pads for smaller bodies available there, especially for elementary school students who may not want to wear a larger pad, might show through their pants or clothing, and that feels really embarrassing for some students. I'm trying to understand the mechanics of why you couldn't put a smaller pad in that machine.
So the EvoGen machines that are in the elementary schools, the ones on the right, it has to be a pad in a box. So it's one of those, I'm sure you've seen them, they're like a white box. It's called a number 4 box. That's what fits that machine.
And are there suppliers that provide smaller pads that fit that box?
I have not seen any. I can look for it, but so far I've not seen any different size pads.
Nor have I.
In the number 4 box.
Can I ask more follow-up questions? One more. Are there different size pads available at the nurse's office, or just these?
So in the nurse's office, we have basically always pads, and we have some panty liners. So that's basically what we have, yeah.
I know the others have questions.
Mr. Green?
Yeah, I guess if you're here long enough, everything new becomes old again. So it's been our policy since 2018 to provide menstrual products in our schools. And in 2019, actually may have this wrong, maybe been 2017. I think actually it was, and I say that. But a year later, we found out that we were still struggling to actually do this for a lot of the reasons mentioned here. At the time, the city's HHS took over responsibility for filling and paying for the menstrual products, so I'm curious to know when that stopped being the case. I'd love to know when they stopped paying for it and stopped having that responsibility. But given that we've been trying to do this now for 8 years, and we're still getting a lot of I don't knows to what still needs to be fairly basic questions. And I want to be clear, I'm not upset with the two of you. In fact, thank you for your work getting to the bottom of the things that aren't working and trying to get them fixed again. But I would really like to know exactly when the city stopped paying for these, and did they tell us they were going to stop doing this so that we could have addressed a problem that I think from our level, at school committee level, we thought we had addressed 7 years ago.
Yes. We agree. Like, we were surprised too. We did not realize that the machines were not being supplied.
Yeah.
And I don't know when the city stopped paying. My guess, because I've asked around the school department, where does the budget for this come from? And there is no answer.
I can explicitly say that we were originally told it was going to be an HHS thing. I can go back and find my notes on it because I was in those conversations.
Yeah, no, I think that would be great. I will say that I think because there was a lot of turnover at the health department, that might be part of it. I know that when the nurses came to the school side from the city, the budget came with us. However, the nurse manager retired in 2020, early in 2020, and it was not in the nurse's budget. I'm not sure if it was in the health department budget, but it didn't come over to the school in any way that we could find.
This, I think, again, speaks to our need to make some structural changes about oversight for these things that live in the overlap of the Venn diagram between city and schools. Because, yeah, it's entirely possible that personnel changes on our side, there's like, these things fall through the cracks. But that's why these things need to be
Institutionalized.
and someone's job.
Yes.
Like someone needs to be responsible for making sure that, oh, this agreement, this MOU, this informal agreement we have with the city is actually happening.
Yep.
Because yeah, it's entirely possible. You know, this was 8 years ago. Very few people who were in those roles 8 years ago are still in those roles. If it was just being done by a gentleman's agreement, as soon as personnel changes, things fall through, and that's not acceptable. So we got to work and create some structural, systematic solutions to oversight for these things.
So I have a quick follow-up, and then Ms. Barish. So following up on that, moving forward, whose job is it to make sure these are filled going forward? Is that HHS, or is that the custodians, or is it someone in SPS, or that's what you're trying to figure out?
So that's exactly what we're trying to figure out. So we have ordered supplies, so a box of pads to all of the elementary schools. They were also given 50 tampons and 50 pads just to start, because that's what we had on hand. Now they're each receiving a box. We believe that the custodians are the ones who will refill them, but I think what we're trying to figure out is how do we keep on top of this? Because the custodians don't report to me, and the nurses don't go into the bathrooms every day to check supplies. And so I think we're trying to figure out what is going to be the best way going forward. At East, we are doing something similar to what the city did. We are having the dispenser installed, and then Citron, which is a bathroom supply is going to come every other month to refill them with 100 pads. That's what we're doing to start with, because it was, we don't know. We're sort of operating blind. We don't know how many will be used. We don't know how many times we have to resupply them. We don't know how quickly students will go through them. So it's still an experiment. We want to see how often that needs to happen. In the other K through 8s, our understanding is the custodians will resupply. But I think the question I have is, I'm happy to reorder them, but it feels disjointed to have custodians going in there every day. They're going to tell their supervisor tells me. So we're still trying to figure out what is going to make the most sense and not be cumbersome for the schools.
Have Ms. Barish and then Mr. Green.
Thank you. Through you, thank you for sharing all of this with us. Thank you for making it happen. I'm curious about, it says K to 8s and the high school. Does that mean the Brown School does not have any of these supplies, or is it just because it's a K to 5 and
Yep, so Brown actually does have supplies, and we're trying to figure out which is the bathroom that makes the most sense to put the dispenser in. It will be a small dispenser. It's the one in our slide. It's a clear plastic dispenser. It holds about 12 of each. It will probably just have pads. But we felt like in a K through 5 school, it makes sense to have a really small dispenser with a small amount of pads. And that's something either the custodian or the nurse could refill, because it's small. We don't anticipate a lot of use. I think the other, question or concern that has been brought forward both by students at schools and principals is concerns about vandalism. And so we don't know, how many of these, to some kids these are going to look like a fun plaything, and we don't know how many are going to be lost that way. One of the reasons I like having the contract at East is that if the machine is vandalized, if all the products disappear in one day, they will come out that day or the next and replace them. And that just, I think, makes so much sense in a K through 8 school. A little bit different, obviously at the high school.
Yeah, and the city right now is doing this restock program with some of their buildings. I believe the libraries, Winter Hill is actually part of that as well, because that original work order came in through recreation. So we'll be able to have a little bit more data after this year to find out, how frequently they have to be restocked and if they have to come back more than every other month.
Mr. Green?
So I think I'm underwhelmed by the numbers, let's say. In a school of 600 students, 50 tampon pads at a time is a couple days. Like it doesn't feel like adequate to the need. And I recognize, because this came up when we first adopted the policy, the concerns about waste and vandalism. And I guess my response is the same as it was then, which is you'll probably see some vandalism at first, and then kids will get over it. It'll stop being new and novel, and the vandalism will stop, and we'll have kids who don't find menstrual products icky, which seems to be a net positive. And as far as them disappearing, if kids feel that they need to take tampons or menstrual products for later, good. Like, this is one of those things where I'm willing to accept false positives or waste or whatever you want to call it in exchange for universal access. And just to be clear, that includes in the boys' bathrooms, because we know there are boys who menstruate, especially in high school. So this is if we're going to take the time to do this right, and we should take time to do this right, let's err on the side of providing too many, not too few.
Mm-hmm. No, I think we agree with that. And just to be clear, all the schools got 50 of everything because we wanted to see if the machines worked. That we had never thought that was going to be enough. All of them have now received about a case of 250 pads. We don't know how long that will last, but yes, absolutely. And we agree that if people need more and need to take them home, of course, yes.
Ms. Pineda-Neufeld? Okay. Ms. Ruchon?
Thank you, Chair. Through you. I have more of an engineering question. I've heard that the flow machines, the one that was on the left side of the slide that you showed, are prone to jamming. I don't know what you've heard or what you've experienced in operating or refilling those machines, but I guess my question is, if that is the case, what is our plan? How are we going to address that? And are we considering using different machines if that is the case?
So I don't know about the jamming. I haven't heard that.
Either.
Have you heard of them jamming? The OntFlow machines are fed by gravity, so you do have to push something down, but then they come out. If you press it again and again, maybe it would get jammed. I honestly don't know.
Yeah, we haven't heard anything, but I'm happy to ask at the high school. I mean, I will ask students and staff and see if they have anything to offer on that.
I think the hard thing about the machines is the EvoGen is also not so much prone, I haven't heard about jamming, but it has 2 locks. They're flimsy locks. It has a battery. One of them's already broken. They're not, neither of them are probably perfect. I think we felt the OntFlow was the better option. However, there's also what is called a simple machine that just has no mechanical things in it whatsoever. So you just pull one out and you pull another one. The problem is, of course, those don't hold as many, so they'd have to be refilled more often. But we could certainly go with something like that if it seems like these mechanical machines keep jamming. So there are options. All of them, of course, there's a trade-off. But yeah.
Ms. Did you want to comment?
No, I wouldn't whenever.
Oh, okay. Ms. Pineda-Neufeld?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That actually answered one of my questions, which is, are there other machines, some more sophisticated machines, or are they more expensive? Is that why we didn't go through them? It sounds like there are other options, but there's some pros and cons to each. Are Are there ones we haven't explored, or can you say more about the other options that we're not utilizing?
So the two other options that, there's sort of three other options that I know of. So Citron offers something called the Citron Simple, which is the one I was sort of just describing, that it holds fewer, but it's a much simpler machine, doesn't have any mechanics, it's not locked, easy to refill. AuntFlo also makes something called the AuntFlo Mini. Again, not mechanical, easier to refill, but only holds, I believe, 25 pads and 25 tampons. Does that sound right?
I'm not sure.
I'd have to look to be absolutely sure. But both of those, one of them is, the AuntFlo one is metal, so I like that because it's durable. The Citron one, the AuntFlo one, I'm sorry, is acrylic. The Citron one is metal, so more durable. I did get estimates on those, just so we'd have some idea of how much they cost. And the AuntFlo one is not available yet, will not be available till April. So, and then the third option, the one that we were thinking of for the Brown School and the gender-neutral bathrooms, is that clear acrylic one. Again, no mechanics whatsoever, you just drop them in. So,
Dr. Ackman?
Thank you, through the chair. I know my colleagues have said this, but thank you. This is, we appreciate you presenting on this, talking to us about it. The health update as well is really useful as we, are post-pandemic. I had a question. There was something that I've heard of that I think is a Massachusetts-based business. It's called, I think it's EGAL, E-G-A-L, and it's pads that are supposed to fit on toilet paper dispensers, and it's a roll of them. I don't know if that's something you've looked at. But given the conversations that I've heard, my concern personally is, to not have this fall to you at the last minute when things aren't working. I would request through the chair, like a memo or something from the district or from the city, so, at some set future date, so we know, who's responsible for what and what the chain of command is, because this is important, and it is obvious. We've pointed out the gaps, but I think we need to figure out how we're going to solve them.
Dr. Romero?
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. I wanted to talk about the solving of the challenge, but before we do that, I want to make sure that we don't lose one of the things that were said earlier, that I believe that because of a student agency and advocacy, this was brought to the forefront of the district. So I just don't want to, that was a Healy student, by the way, so I just don't want to lose that, and also the fact that you did everything right away to make sure that we caught up with the issue. I have heard multiple versions of how do we solve this issue. By the way, I also want to piggyback a little bit on what Member Andre said about vandalism. I do think that that's a misnomer when it comes to products that might create students who never seen things like that. They throw them, and it does create some challenges. I think that there is a part of being familiar and raising the level of understanding and culture, and once this becomes part of the norm, I think that it will be more normalized. But I just wanted to kind of just minimize the speculation as to what is the system that we have. I think we can partner up with DPW, we can partner up with the other teams and determine what's the best way to address this. I think that this, again, this just came up to the surface, and we are even addressing in what budget we put it. So I think that we will be able to figure this out, and yes, I welcome a conversation later on to see how this partnering up with the city will work. But we can figure that out. That's a technical thing that is the easiest thing in my mind.
And just related to that, do we know what other school districts do and how they handle it? Is this something that maybe we can not reinvent the wheel? And do you have, it sounds like Mr. Green may have thoughts or feedback on that?
I have some information on this that is probably at this point outdated. We were one of the first school districts to try to tackle this. But so there are, it very much depends on the city. There are cities that are doing this where it is paid for out of the city budget. There are cities that are paid where it is done where it is paid for out of the school budget. My guess, just from the handful of cities I've looked at, is that there's some correlation between who pays for that and pays for basic building maintenance. So like and I think basic building maintenance means like who pays for the paper towels in our bathrooms, those kinds of like the other things that are filled. So I think, and this was my original comment on this was going to be is, I agree with the superintendent. This is not. I'm not looking to be like, oh, the city screwed up. Or this. Like, I don't know that anyone screwed up. Things happen when there aren't controls in place. So I think Dr. Eichmann's point is absolutely dead on. What I would love to see in advance of the next budget, city and school budget, is an MOU that lays out explicitly how we're going to manage this program going forward. And once we have that, we can, discuss how it's paid for, who oversees it, like, who's accountable, who supplies, who's responsible for making sure, just whatever the process is, just lay it out so that everyone knows when, those of us who are currently in these seats are no longer in these seats.
Mr. Bichon?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I just want to add on to Mr. Green's comments and mention that this should absolutely not be a PTA line item. The fact that the West Somerville PTA stepped forward and filled that gap, I think is incredible. I heard some, frankly, horrific stories from last year and just the situation that was occurring at West, and I'm not, this isn't pointing fingers, but the fact that our partners in the PTA stepped forward and met that need was absolutely incredible, and I'm sure that we can work together to find where it fits in the actual municipal school budget. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay. I think with that, we can let you go and move on to our steps. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you. So we're switching to the presentations on our improvement plans, and I'm going to have Dr. Boston Davis start that process.
Thank you, through the chair. So first, I want to, we're very excited to hear from both the Healy School and the Capuano on their school improvement plans this evening. I wanted to just remind the committee of the memo that I presented last meeting that was written by our Director of Assessment Accountability, Data Assessment and Accountability, Samantha Elligine. And it just kind of went over a high level of what to expect for the school improvement planning process. So as a reminder, some of the higher reminders that were in that, or the higher notes that were in that memo included the timeline and included that there's a common template that all schools use this year. So in your packets, you will see the plan. So from that template for both the Healy and the Capuano, as in addition to their presentation, so their slides. Okay, so you'll see two documents from each school this evening. The other reminder that I wanted to give that was shared in the memo was that all school improvement plans are aligned to the strategic plan, the district strategic plan, under 4 priority areas. Those are academic excellence, equity and access, wellness and joy, and family and community engagement. So you'll see those in all of the plans going forward, including the plans that we will be presented tonight. So with that, I'd like to invite up Principal Sarah Wall from the Healy School. Great, yeah. Come on up. And we are very excited. So with that, I will pass it over to you for your presentation.
Awesome. Felix and I we thought Felix was going first, but now it will be me. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your time and for having me here. I'm so excited to share this plan with you. It's been really a labor of love over the last few months, and really the work started last year. But we'll go ahead and get started. So should I just give you a thumbs up when it's time to change? That's you. Great. Can we go to the next one? Thanks. So this is very difficult to see from where you're sitting, but hopefully you can see it better closer to you. I don't need to read our whole mission, vision, and values, but I do want to talk a little bit about a few key pieces that stood out to me in these. So the mission was in existence before I started at the Healy. And as I got to know the community, the families, the faculty, and just kind of talked and learned about the history of the school, a few key pieces that exist in the mission really stood out, and then the School Improvement Council worked together to build a kind of vision statement around that. So I just want to draw our attention to a couple of key things that will be present throughout the School Improvement Plan that are really, really important and like closely held values of the community. One of them is around curriculum that is sort of based on project-based learning. That came up over and over through like multiple conversations with multiple constituents since I started at the Healy and have started to learn about sort of where we come from and what our values are as a community. So that'll come up a lot. And also the value that we place on student voice and on students' sort of sense of belonging and their ability to feel that valued as individuals and as a whole person at the school. And so that really is going to speak to a lot of what we put into this plan. And all of that, of course, at the very bottom, you can see our cute little stack of emojis that speak to our values as a school. And those are excellence, joy, creativity, and openness that really are going to drive a lot of what we'll talk about. So we can go to the first goal now. So our first goal is connected to the areas of the strategic plan around academic excellence and equity and access. And it's really about, you can read the goal on the slides or in the actual plan in front of you, but basically it's about making sure that every single student gets to experience instruction that prepares them for deep critical thinking and grade level skill development with content that's really, truly engaging and authentic for them, that's relevant not just to what we're doing in the building, but to life beyond school. So you'll see right below that some of the data that we based this on. On the left, it's the end of year assessment data, and you can see like a third to a half of students are where we would want them to be right now, which is nowhere near what we want to see out of Healy students. And that data is something that we track super closely and look at daily and try to use to adapt our practice both in the whole group environment but also in small group, and I'll talk about that when I get to action steps for goal 1. But the thing that is a little bit more visible for us, like the data that comes from student outcomes is a bit of a lagging indicator, right? You only see it after you try something new and then see what the impact is. So our ILT, our instructional leadership team, developed a walkthrough tool that would give us a little bit more of like that leading indicator data around what is actually happening in classrooms that we believe will lead to these like improved outcomes that we're looking for. So on the right, what you see is data from our very first walkthrough this year, where we looked for a whole lot of different things, but the sort of strategies and practices that we ended up narrowing in on in our professional development and in our school improvement planning are listed right here. So the first one you'll see says level 3 and 4 thinking. And if you aren't part of our ILT or our faculty, that might not mean a lot to you, but to us it is critically important. We look at sort of student thinking, and you'll sort of see in that goal that deep critical thinking in 3 levels, and it's sort of called the domains of knowledge wheel. The first 2 levels are kind of, if you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, they're those lower levels of just like understanding, knowing, being able to describe and explain something, being able to do a skill. But when you move to levels 3 and 4, that's when you see students really doing analytical, critical thinking work, and that's something we wanted to be able to measure. And it's hard because it doesn't always show up super clearly in your data, in your student outcome data, but you can observe it and you can collect data on what is actually happening when you hear kids talk to each other in a class, when you hear a teacher ask questions of students. Is it asking them to do thinking on level 1 or level 2, or is it really pushing students to do the work we know they're all capable of and deserve to get to do in their classrooms, that level 3 and 4 thinking work? So we looked for that, and in our walkthrough in the fall, you can see here, about a quarter of our walkthroughs demonstrated that kind of thinking, that kids were doing that kind of thinking. And just to be clear, when we're doing those walkthroughs, it's like 5 to 7 minutes per classroom, and we get in about 20 classrooms. So it's not like we're seeing the whole lesson and kids aren't doing that level thinking, but it does give us a good sense of about how often this is happening on a typical day. And we really felt like 24% was not where we wanted to be. We really wanted to see that number go up because we know that that is what we need our students to be prepared to do at every grade level. This is not a middle school thing. This is not an upper elementary thing. This is kindergarteners. And to see, I'm gonna like go off on a whole tangent and I'll try to control myself, but to hear our kindergarten team talk about how they took a typical activity that they had done for years and changed it and made minor shifts that weren't a lot of work for the teachers to do, but that actually allowed the kindergartners to access like level 4 evaluative analytical thinking with each other about geometry. It was like goosebumps. So that is something that we've been talking about a lot this year, and that will go into the next 3 years of our I want to say strategic plan, but it's a school improvement plan in terms of how we're focusing our professional development and learning as a team and just weaving that throughout everything we do. Discourse and language supports are also incredibly important, and those will come up a little bit more as I talk more about some of our other goals. Can you go to the next slide? So action steps for goal 1, to get us to more deeper thinking, to get us sort of the outcomes that we're looking for in iReady and DIBELS are outlined on this slide, and I'm not gonna read every single bullet point, but there are some key things that come up over and over again in our school improvement plan. One of them is really enthusiastically embracing all of the initiatives that are going on instructionally at the district level. That sounds super obvious, but for us, it's incredibly important because A, we're rolling out awesome curriculum for K-8. It actually requires a lot of that deeper thinking. It is really aligned with what we're looking for. And so making sure that we've got early adopters at the Healy that are learning and sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like getting comfortable with and becoming leaders in how to use that curriculum. But also there's a lot of work happening right now around literacy intervention that is critically important at the Healy. We have a huge and robust and incredibly talented intervention team for both reading specialists, math specialists, multilingual, and special education, and making sure that they are all aligned with what's happening at the district, that their voices are on those committees so that Healy student needs and interests are represented really well in that, and making sure that sort of that work really lives and we lead that work at the Healy in a certain way. That's a huge part of it. And then the other piece, beyond the professional development that I talked about and really prioritizing those higher level thinking skills and multilingual learner supports, you'll see also a sort of recurrence of a couple of themes in terms of creating a schedule that allows for collaboration among general educators and interventionists. And that's something that's, again, seems simple, seems obvious, but it makes a massive difference if teams are able to work together and collaborate and really create a coherent intervention plan for kids rather than just pockets of intervention that students don't always. They'll get a lot of great support, but if it's not coherent, if it's not aligned, you're not going to see the impact. So those are some of the major action steps for goal 1, and you'll see sort of the 3-year outcomes along the side there. We can go on to goal 2. The next goal is also academic excellence and equity, and this goal really helps us to drill down more into our multilingual learners. The Healy is an incredibly special, awesome, incredible, diverse, vibrant place, and we have a lot of multilingual learners who have unique instructional needs that it was important for us to really focus on in this plan. So you can see on this slide our 2023-24 end-of-year outcomes for iReady and for DIBELS, and I want to point out one big thing about that data, which is that in that first line, you'll see the multilingual learners meeting typical growth on iReady is really similar to our overall population of students. The students who are identified as multilingual learners at the Healy are growing, they're learning, they're making progress at a similar rate to their fluent English-speaking peers. However, the line below that shows what the outcomes, the ultimate sort of proficiency levels of those students are. It is significantly lower, and that was a huge concern for us. And in some ways, of course, we have a SEI1 program, we've got students who are brand new to English, these tests are in English, English, you will expect to some degree the outcomes to be lower, but not to the degree that we were seeing. And we were able to kind of pull out different populations of multilingual learners and see that no, it's not just our SEI1 newcomer population. No, it's not just students who have interrupted formal instruction, although those populations struggle as well. It's really an area that we need to drill down on for all students who fall into that category of being multilingual learners. And the goal of that is to make sure, as you can see above, that they get the academic and social emotional support that they need to thrive and ultimately pass that access test and get to grade level in ELA. Next slide. So our action steps here are very similar to what you saw in the previous slide, with one difference, which is that one big one was staffing. We didn't feel we had enough staffing, so this year, which is the first year of our strategic plan, we were able to add an additional multilingual education specialist, so more services were available to that growing population of students at the Healy. But similarly, you'll see that same sort of refrain of creating a schedule that allows for teachers, for multilingual education specialists and general education teachers to collaborate and align their intervention. Many of our multilingual learners not only receive services from the MLE department, but they also receive reading intervention. Those folks need opportunities to talk and align, and not only with each other, but with the student's classroom teacher, and making sure that we're really being thoughtful about making space for that is going to be a huge way to move that needle. So you can see also on the side what our three-year outcomes are, this being the first year, the next year, and the year after, in terms of our iReady and DIBELS data for multilingual learners and our percentage of students who are meeting their access progress targets. Next goal, please. Awesome. This one's fun. So goal 3, also academic excellence, equity, wellness, and joy we're gonna add here, because this one is about how we make sure students at every grade level have increased access to project-based learning. Project-based learning is massively important to the Healy community. It's important to me personally. I have a little bit of a bias towards it, but it was really beautiful for me to hear from members of our community, members of our faculty, about how important this is to them, to see it written in our sort of historical documents showing sort of where the Healy's values have come from and developed. And of course we know that research shows us that project-based learning has a massive positive impact on academic outcomes for students and is deeply connected to the values that we have at the Healy of creativity and joy. When the School Improvement Council looked at our conditions for learning survey from students at from the end of the year last year, we were pretty surprised to see that right around half of our students said that what they learn in school is relevant and that they have a voice in what they learn. Considering that those are real values of ours, we would have expected and hoped, right, that students saw more of themselves and more of their world and what they were learning. And so that really spoke to us having to put a lot more energy and kind of reinvigorate this value around project-based learning for our students. Next slide. So here are our action steps for that. This one's pretty simple. It's just start small and grow slowly over time until we've got project-based learning at every grade level, K to 8, for every student. So last summer, we had one teacher pilot this. She took a training, she planned 3 units, she rolled them out in the 2nd grade, and is very excited and has been getting sort of a lot of buzz from her colleagues around like how this worked for her. So this year, we're just working on recruiting several more. We're gonna do a summer, hopefully we're applying for a BU consortium grant. We're looking for ways to fund the project-based learning professional development and teacher time around planning those units. And then this is gonna be ongoing past this SIP, because by the 3rd year of this school improvement plan, we still won't quite be to where every single classroom has a unit planned. And part of that is because of what I mentioned before around the curriculum. So all of our K to 5 teachers are getting new curriculum. Most of them are getting new curriculum for 2 different contents, math and ELA, over the next couple of years. So we didn't want to add another curricular sort of weight to that. We really wanted to give them the time and space to get to know those curricula well, to really like integrate those into their practice before we start playing with it. So those folks are going to have a little bit more time. Our middle school will sort of lead the charge on some of this. But yeah, so hopefully by the 27-28 school year, every single classroom at the Healy will do project-based learning, and we are very excited about that. So that was goal 3. Goal 4. Anybody need a stretch break? This has been a while. I'm getting a little warm up here. Okay. Goal 4 is connected to the strategic plan areas of equity and access and wellness and joy, and it's really around student voice. Student voice has been something that, again, has come up again and again. We were surprised and a little concerned about that 57% you see of students who say they feel like they have a voice in what they learn, because we know agency and ownership are hugely important for students to make progress and to feel invested in school. So that's what this goal is really about. Next slide. And so we're trying to tackle it in 3 ways. One of them is really directly aligned with what's happening at the district around SEAT, which stands for, Student Equity Action Team, Student Equity and Action Team, something like that, that our schools are all doing. All the schools in Somerville are doing that for our 7th and 8th graders, and it's been awesome. It's a chance for our older students to do some community action research about our school, learn about what's working and what's not working, and make proposals. So that's a really good way, along with student council, to elevate the voices of our older students. And along that same theme, really, there's a lot of energy around, at the Healy especially, around considering ways to make the middle school schedule more developmentally appropriate, to allow for flexibility and choice that we know our older students need to feel invested again and engaged in their own learning. So considering ways to add that into the way we do middle school in terms of electives, in terms of maybe like shifting around the way middle school works. So there's some action steps there. But I would say the one that is will have the most impact and that had the most kind of energy around it in terms of our School Improvement Council and other groups that looked at this is our student reflective self-evaluation action steps. So that's basically around making sure that every student in grades K to 8 has an opportunity to be engaged in their own evaluation and have a voice in how they're progressing in all of their learning. So that looks like either portfolios or student-led conferences for every student in every grade eventually. Again, this is like a multi-year plan, so it's not all happening right away, but our 7th and 8th grade team is piloting portfolios this year. We're really excited about it, and it's going to be a sort of process of working with our ILT, working with our collaborative planning time leads with our, sort of teacher leaders at each grade level to figure out what model works best at what grade level over the next couple of years and really getting that model up and running. So we're very excited about that. And we'll talk a little bit more about it when I get to the final goal, which is about parent engagement, right? About family and caregiver engagement in not just events and being present at school, but actually actively being part of reflecting on their students' learning. All right, that'll do for goal number 4. The 5th goal is around equity and access and wellness and joy from our strategic plan, and it's about ensuring that students at the Healy experience equitable, restorative, and consistent systems to support social, emotional, and behavioral development. So we looked at, to get a sense of where we were with this, we looked at our conditions for learning survey again for students and staff, and while there were a lot of bright spots, and I didn't include nearly all of them on this slide, there was one spot that really stood out to us a bunch, and it's at the bottom of this chart, and it's the student support category, which was about students' perception of discipline and sort of their peers' ability to follow rules at school, and it was significantly lower than what we would hope, right? We had about 47 overall % of students having a positive response to student support questions, and then 43% and 31% respectively to those 2 specific questions I mentioned, and that was a huge red flag for us. And so there's a lot going on at the district, but also specifically at the Healy, at each level. When we talk about multi-tiered supports, what we mean is like that first tier being kind of the proactive, the preventative, the like everybody gets this, and it's the way we build community. So there's a lot going on in that category. Everybody in the district, for example, rolled out a new version of Second Step, and we've got that happening K to 8, and got a new position, which is the social emotional learning coordinator. So we have a teacher leader who's in charge of kind of heading up social emotional learning. At the Healy, we added sort of a committee under that person. So instead of there just being one SEL coordinator, we have a restorative practices team that meets regularly, that they do their own walkthroughs and they collect data. And so that's one of the pieces that we are going to use to sort of track how we're doing with our tiered interventions, is like, what are the walkthroughs showing us about that social emotional learning supports? And we're working as a school improvement council to develop habits of mind, so like ways that we can both teach and evaluate students in terms of how they're thinking about their own learning, how they're sort of, what habits of mind they want to use to be successful in the classroom and then also in the community. So those are some action steps that are going to go for Tier 1. Tier 2 and 3 really are about collaboration with the district and some of their really helpful, we've had this really helpful partnership so far with Boston Children's Hospital, where they're observing and giving us feedback on some of those things. But the main thing we're noticing is like, we actually need more data. And there are a lot of tools out there, universal screeners for social emotional learning, that we'd like to pilot and ultimately adopt at the Healy to try to target our social emotional supports more, because we really feel strongly, I think all of us at the school at every level feel really strongly that it's the more we invest up front in the preventative work and our incredible sort of mental health and counseling team and our student support team and all of the ways that we can sort of wrap our arms around kids and see them as whole people, the less we have to do the responsive and reactive stuff. So even at Tier 2 and 3, it still hopefully will feel very much like a positive, proactive approach rather than a reactive approach. And the very last one is always important. It's about attendance, and it's just about strengthening our family partnerships around that, because you can't learn, you can't feel a sense of belonging, you can't get better with these social, emotional, and academic skills if you're not in school. So those are really important steps we're going to take in that category. Goal 6, please. Thank you. Our final goal is about family engagement, which also really touches closely on equity and access and wellness and joy. We want to make sure that the families, that caregivers who are engaged at the Healy are representative of the racial and linguistic backgrounds of our student population, because we know how important family partnership is for student success in school, and we have noticed over time, at every level, that it is not always the families who feel engaged, who feel welcomed, who feel invited, are not always representative of the student demographics of our school, and so we want to make sure we're working really hard to break down some of those barriers for families. And you can see that represented in this first table, which shows the family responses, just family responses to the Conditions for Learning survey, and how they're not, again, I compared them, the middle column is the family responses, and then the column on the right compares them to the student population overall, and there are some pretty big discrepancies, especially when we look at English-speaking and white families, and then Spanish-speaking and Hispanic Latinx families. So that's something that was a big concern for us. We want to make sure the data and the information we're getting represents our students. But we also want to make sure that all families, beyond the data, obviously, the most important thing is that all families feel welcome and invited and a part of our community. Next slide. So one of the biggest action steps in this category, and many of you have seen this here at school committee and know this woman, but we have a new position and a new kind of initiative at the school called the Healy Families Initiative, and the position is the Family Partnership Coordinator position, and that's Alcimara Oliveira, who is one of our middle school teachers. She teaches Spanish, and she has worked so closely and so hard with this team of educators to create language-based support groups for families. And through those support groups, they're providing really targeted workshops, partnerships, experiences for families, and they're also creating pathways for those families to get involved in the school in other ways. So the goal of that Healy Family Initiative, beyond providing that support, is also to make sure that those families know when and how to be engaged in other ways to have impact on the school as a whole, like through the PTA, through Friends of Healy, through being part of organizing events and things like that. So that has been massively helpful. And one of the next steps in that area is to actually have families from those groups come and co-facilitate a professional development session for teachers on how to maximize family partnerships and engagement. So we're really excited about that. And then the other big action step you'll notice in these bullets for family engagement is to focus it on academics, to make sure that the events that we're putting the most energy and time into are about student learning, because we found actually, not just because those are the most important ones for families to come to, those are also the most interesting ones for families, and that's where we tend to get the best turnout. So really, putting a lot of emphasis and energy into things like literacy night, those student-led conferences we were talking about, right? What better way to get to know how your child is doing in school than to hear your child themselves talk about what they're doing in school and what they've learned and what they hope to do better. And then finally, the Healy Family Initiative did this awesome thing where they created summer slide binders for families so that families can really be a part of bridging the gap from one school year to the next. We got those out to about 70 families last year, but they are incredibly ambitious, this Healy Family Initiative, and they want to make it a lot more for next year. So those are some of the big action steps. Second to last slide, I swear. Okay, so the actions that you saw outlined in a lot of these are not random. They are not whimsical. They are not things that we chose because they felt good or looked good or we thought they might work. We really tried to base, as a school improvement council, as an ILT, as a family support team, our decisions and our action steps on research. So you might be familiar, I hope that you are, and if you're not, I strongly recommend going out there and taking a look at Visible Learning by John Hattie. He did a meta-analysis of thousands of education studies and created this sort of hierarchy of impact, I guess, is one way to think about it. There's an effect size. He was able to kind of standardize the impact that all of these different factors have on student learning. And that's what that teeny tiny little graph is on the left that you can barely see. But that shows you about the top 20 or so factors in terms of what has the most impact on student learning. And so much of what we chose to do in this plan really connects to the highest impact. So the very, very top one on the top is collective teacher efficacy. So that basically means if teachers believe that together what they do will impact student learning, magic happens, and it actually does. So what we want to do, and what we repeatedly talk about in the plan, is to make sure we're making space and time for teachers to collaborate and plan together to make sure that the work that they're doing is moving in the same direction for students. And then you'll also see a couple on there that connect really closely to that student self-evaluation step, action step, that self-reported grading, that sense of self-efficacy for students, and the evaluation and reflection all have very high effect size in the meta-analysis. And then the third one from the top that you see in the bigger type, where it says response to intervention, that gets at the very intentional work we've been doing around goal 1 of small group data-driven intervention. That has incredibly high effect size. And then of course, classroom discussion and scaffolding, that's making sure students have opportunities to talk to each other, opportunities to think deeply, and the supports they need to access that. So I just wanted to name, like, so much of what we do is tied to this research because you can't know until you're done whether it had the right effect, so you have to choose your action steps incredibly carefully. Last slide. All right, this is just my acknowledgement slide. The Healy is incredibly lucky, so lucky, and I am so lucky to get to work with just massively talented groups of individuals. So, dedicated, insightful, and compassionate School Improvement Council, they are incredible. This would never have happened without them. And one of our School Improvement Council members is sitting in the room here, Steve Stefano, who is also one of our folks who's piloting our portfolios. We also have an outstanding instructional leadership team and our family support team, dedication out of control. They're incredible and wonderful and amazing, and I'm so lucky to get to work with all of these folks. None of this could have happened without them, and that is all.
All right, thank you so much. I'm sure my colleagues will have questions, comments. I'll give everyone a minute to noodle up. Ms. Parrish?
Hey, Eleanor. Thank you so much for this and for your just letting us see the joy and excitement that you feel for the work that you're doing. It's really wonderful. So thank you. I'm curious about the 5th specialist that you proposed in maybe goal 1.
That one comes up in a couple goals because
Yes.
that action step impacts a lot of things. Yes.
So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit. I know it's already late and you've been here for a while, so I don't want to make you tell us all the details, but I'm curious about how the fifth specialist increases time for collaboration, and also, do you have a thought about what that fifth specialist specializes in?
Yes, I do.
Great.
So thanks for that question. So there are a couple of reasons why this came up for us. One is around the thing that you're mentioning is around creating more time for collaboration. What's tricky, what we're finding is tricky. We have common planning time now, right? Wednesday afternoons, and it's wonderful, but everybody's doing it at the same time. And so that makes it really hard for your literacy specialist or your MLE specialist to get together with the teachers that they work with and look at data and make sure that the kids are progressing the way that we are hoping they, really look at that progress monitoring data and plan interventions better, more intentionally. It's not enough time for it. And the school-based CPT is only happening every fourth Wednesday or something like that. So it's not often enough. Even if logistically it was set up to be able to do that, it still wouldn't really be frequently enough. So what we would like to be able to do is create for every grade level one period a week where they're able to have that collaboration time, and it would be at different times. So even if, I would say at least every other or every third week, we would want to see the general educators from a team able to meet with their reading specialists, their special educators, their MLE teachers, their math specialists, to make sure that the students who we're monitoring most closely are making the progress we expect. And if they're not, we've got all the expertise in the room to be able to make those plans, adjust those plans to meet kids' needs better. So that's how the fifth specialist would help in that way. Does that answer your question, Eleanor?
And then the follow-up was just what the fifth specialist
they would teach health. Yes, so we currently already, so I want to make sure to not take, so it's complicated, and there will be a lot of, if we get this fifth specialist position, which I very much hope we will, there will be a lot of conversation around how to logistically make it work to maximize what kids are, to make sure kids are getting what they need. But my initial thought was it would be health, because kids are already taking health, and so it wouldn't be taking away as much, it wouldn't be adding much to the schedule, and it would also possibly be social emotional learning. So there would be a teacher who would have time and space for students to be able to learn about health and also social emotional health in a fifth time block.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Are there other specific questions? Dr. Akin, and then Mr. Green.
Thank you to the chair. Thank you, Principal Wall. This is a really inspiring way to kick off looking at the SIPs. I will say in my day job, I've taught a whole PD on Hattie's, specifically visible learning in mathematics. So I'm happy you brought it up. I'm happy that you're using data in such a strategic way. But so much of this is so positive. And I mean, it's all so positive and a very thoughtful way of looking at data. My one, I don't know if it's a critique, but request is for the family engagement, the summer binders.
Yeah.
Can we eliminate slide? Because if the goal is to keep them up, I
Yes.
get that it's slide preventing, but if it's just to academic support and engagement, so much of this is so positive. Let's keep the positivity.
Absolutely. Point taken. Thank you, Emily.
Mr. Green?
As a Healy parent, first and foremost, thank you. That the change in culture has been real and visible. And I appreciate you highlighting all the people whose work went into this, because I think that has always been the Healy's underutilized strength, is that there are a whole lot of very talented, very caring people, and I'm just excited to see how much thought and how much rigor, because I think there's oftentimes this myth that progressive education can't be rigorous. So how much rigor has gone into a real actionable plan that isn't just, well, we hope to narrow the gaps, but it's the real action steps and really channeling, again, just the great depth of talent that exists at Healy. And I guess I just want to say I'm really excited to see where we are a year from now.
Same.
Ms. Patone and then Mr. Bitone.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Thank you so much for this presentation. I'm a former Healy parent of 2 kids, and I was involved. It's really exciting to still see the values there, the mission, that there was a lot of energy put into it, but seeing how everything can evolve to represent the families that are there now and the educators that are participating now. I don't know if my question is more for the superintendent's office or for you, but you know, you mentioned project-based learning, and when this first launched, you know, whatever it was, 10 years ago, the work to, you know, combine 2 different programs into one school, there was a lot of investment made under project-based learning. And now we're at a point where obviously we have to reinvest. This is not something that just sits, you do it once. And I guess my question is around the fact you mentioned, like, I hope we get a grant this summer so we can do this. Like, I don't hope I want to fund this stuff. And I don't want to just fund it for this school. I mean, the original vision was that the Healy would do some of this work and that would propagate into other schools. And I'm not implying that we're not doing some project-based learning in other schools. I'm sure we are. So I guess I'm just putting it out there that, you know, when we invest, it's just like the social emotional work. When we invest in it 1 year, 6 or 7 years out, there needs to continue to be that investment. And I don't know where structurally that fits in the budget. And you might not have an answer around this. And I also, I guess, want to emphasize that this is sort of the core of the work. It's not just, you know, curriculum is huge, super important. I'm glad we're investing in this. So the years that we're not buying curriculum, are we going to be investing in project-based learning across the district? So I know it's a big, broad question. I just, you know, when I look the long view, I think about, boy, we invested all this money, like, and time 10 or 12 years ago to set this all up. And clearly we're in a place where we have all these different educators. And how do we make it? I know I'm such a broken record around sustainability, and I know that you guys also are very focused on that. So that's where I'll leave it.
Want to respond? Yeah.
Thank you for the comment. I just wanted to share a couple of things. One is, I think, perspective in terms of where we were before. I think when we came in, it was clear that there was a gap in terms of the instructional materials that we had. You know, for whatever reason, I mean, the pandemic was part of that. So that's one thing. Just to know where we are, we have invested significantly in a lot of science-based and evidence-based programs. And so that's a significant investment. And I feel that the strategy that Principal Wall has shared around making sure that that implementation takes place as we build up on project-based learning is one that I think, in my mind, is the most sound. In my mind, I think ultimately a student-centered instruction is all about making sure that students co-create the learning experience. But for us to get there, it's going to take some time. The high school is also doubling into that work in smaller steps. I think that we have to make sure that we also are solid in our understanding of the mathematics and the science of reading to be able to create innovation in other areas. So I think it's going to take some time, but I think that the strategy that Sarah has described is very similar to what I like to see across the board, which is building up on the basics of reading mathematics, and then also focusing the instruction around things that are more relevant for kids.
I also just want to name, I think Next Wave Full Circle does a lot of really solid pioneering work with the project-based learning in the district, and they're someone that we really are excited to try to learn from.
Great to hear. Mr. Bitone?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Principal Wall, and School Improvement Council members.
He was calling
Steve. No, but not just you, but your many invisible colleagues who are not here tonight, but contributed. There's so much, as you mentioned, joy and student-centered work happening here. It's remarkable to see. I'm so grateful for it. And it's so necessary. So just like it, and it shines off of you. So thank you, really. excellent use of emojis also, just,
Yeah.
that's so crucial,
I really
crucial.
pride myself on the emoji.
I want to echo what my colleagues have said about, and Dr. Carmona has said about project-based learning. Many of the action steps that you're pointing towards seem well supported by the evidence. They seem targeted towards the outcomes that you're looking for. I don't have a question.
Okay.
My jaw dropped at slide 3. My jaw dropped when I saw the percentage of students below grade level.
Yeah.
And then my jaw dropped again on slide 5 when I saw the percentage
Of MLs.
of MLs. So 2/3 of students are not at grade level. Somewhere between 95 and 98% of multilingual learners are not at grade level. If this were an aberrant point in our district, or if this were, 2025 is a rough year, but I mean, we've been seeing these numbers for a long time. And I've been watching these meetings for a long time, and many of us come together and we have ideas and interventions and joy and student focus and all the things that we want to have. And here we are still. And I'm just upset. I'm upset, and I think what you're proposing makes a lot of sense, and I sure hope it's the right thing. But I just want to, this is just sobering. And I'm glad you see it, and I'm glad you're showing it to us. And we really need to do everything we can. So thank you for your passion and for your levels, am I going to do this right? For your levels 3 and 4 thinking with respect to how we can pull this all together for these kids, because they really need it. So thank you.
All right. With that, seeing no more comments, I think we will let you go and say thank you again.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, Principal Wall. Thank you, Mr. Stefano. Thank you for the whole the Healy crew. I did give you a shout out. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your presentation, your first school improvement plan presentation. Excellent job. So with that, I'm excited to welcome up the team from the Capuano School. Come on up. Or just Principal Caraballo. Very excited to have you.
Good evening, everyone. And I'm a proud member of Somerville Public Schools for 18 years now. The last 7, I have been an AP for 4 years, and this is my 3rd year as a principal. Very proudly so. And I would like to present my assistant principal, which you met before. This is her first year with us. But she's a product of Somerville Public Schools, too. So, yeah. And like Dr. Boston Davis, I was going to say JPT, like she said, our school improvement plan is aligned with the strategic plan. We have 4 goals, and I'm going to start right away. So the vision and mission, you can read later. And before I continue, I want to say that I put in front of you the charts, because I know how those charts look very small on the screen. So you have a bigger version of that, so for when I refer to those. And there's a full explanation of the charts on the actual school improvement plan, but I will have, I will give you a summary of it once it comes to that. The vision and vision of our school emphasizes creating an inclusive, student-centered, early learning environment where every child is valued and supported. We focus on fostering academic, but also social and emotional growth. which I would say they're on par, seeing that we have our students are 3 to 5 years old. So that's all we have, right? And we are the welcoming center to all the incoming families to Somerville, because once the year starts, any incoming family, if they have a preschool age child, they will come to our building. And parents who generally have no siblings in the other schools, they tend to come to our school too. So we are the face of the district at that stage. So that also means that part of our mission and vision prioritizes collaboration with families, recognizing caregivers as essential partners in a child's education. Because as you might be aware, culturally, in many countries, the school is like who does everything for the student, and then, the parent drops the kid, and then everything happens for the kid. But we always, we strive to show the parents that they're also part of that process. And our core values are community as first one, care, equity, respect, and trust. Next slide. So looking at there are two charts over there. For our academic excellence goal, we look at some of the data that we have. We don't have a lot of data because we have 3 to 5 years old. But this year we started a new, that was piloted last year for 2 classes, but now all pre-Ks are doing the preschool early literacy indicators. So those help establish like a benchmark or how the students will be by 3rd grade, right? So we are using some of that data for the preschool. So if you hear me mention Peli, that's what I'm talking about. But for pre-K, we had the DIBELS, which you're familiar with, which emphasizes in phonemic and phonological awareness. And for that, the first chart suggests that while 55% of students are on track, 45% need additional support, with a focus on intensive intervention for nearly a third of the group. Okay? So that's why one of the only asks that I have for my budget was about a literacy interventionist for kindergarten specifically, to support that, 8.5. So looking at that, we have a new curriculum happening for the pre-K. Is the C curriculum. It was developed by the Early Childhood Department, and then this is the year of implementation for everybody. Last year we had 2 classes also piloting it, but this year we're having a full system of support for the educators. So, we're offering every introduction of a unit, the coaches meet with the teachers and then, introduce the materials of the unit. And we have, each teacher has a coach assigned, so they're working closely with the teachers in the implementation of this new curriculum. So having that in mind, and then looking at the Peli data, which is the other chart that you have. So we only have, because all the classes started this year, we have what we had in the fall. And just so you're familiar, I know you're aware of this, so our school is like a floating school, right? Because we have students for 2 years, right? So you will never see me presenting like a cohort of data because that is non-existent for us. So always our goals, and I would like to acknowledge my School Improvement Council, in my ILT, which work closely with me on developing this. That's always our goals are like on a yearly basis, like what we expect to see at the end of the year for our students. Because, some of our pre-K students stay for kindergarten. All of our kindergartners they graduate, right, to their respective community schools. But, it's always like a smaller amount of students remain from pre-K to K. So I just wanted you to be aware of that when you hear our goals and stuff like that. So the Peli chart, which is the second one in your document, suggests that even though the students showed a strong start overall, only about 25% of students need additional literacy support. So this is, it doesn't look as bad as we would have expected. But, at Target and above, it's like students that demonstrated, above the benchmark expected for a student in the fall when they're 4 years old. So, together that will be 73%. So taking those two, we have our goals for foundational literacy growth. Because that's what we do with literacy, is like the foundational literacy. So 60% of our students will reach core proficiency for DEVILS, and 85% of students will meet the benchmark on PELI, like being above or above target. And, and for this, we focus on the alphabet knowledge on the PELI and the phonemic awareness indicator of the DEVILS for indicators of literacy success. Next slide. Oh, you know what I read from slide 3? Yeah, that's action steps, yeah. So our action steps is like, basically we will be access baseline data and set individualized targets by looking. So we're doing data dives every 6 weeks with the teachers, in which we look at the data that they have collected, the formal data, AKA PELI and DEVILS, but also informal data, right? Formative assessments that they have done in the classroom. So I will talk to you more about that a little bit later, but we have been working on our tiered intervention schedule, like tier 1, 2, and 3, and then we're also working with the teachers to early on identify students who are receiving their tier 2 and students who already need tier 2, or if they are not showing progress, that they might need to go into child study team for for referrals and further analysis of their growth. So that's part of our action steps. We're assessing that data to evaluate the students, and then we are implementing targeted instructions and interventions. That's part of those data dives. So, and then those we do individual with the teachers, and then also in the grade level meetings, we look at the the data as a team. So so in that way we foster collaboration amongst teachers. And then a normal action step coming from these two is like monitor that progress and adjust instruction. So that's why we have every 6 weeks this meeting with the teachers, just with the educators, to make sure that if a student is not showing progress, to try to collaborate with the teacher in what can be done. Next slide. We go to the next. If I'm going too fast, just tell me to slow down. The next equity and access goal, once again aligned with the district strategic plan. And when we analyze this data, DEVILS and PELI, we realized that there was a discrepancy with the development of language learners. So if you look at that data, so once again, the first one is the PELI for students who are, the advantage that we have this year is that this is the first year that pre-K students can be identified as English learners. So having that demographic established, because before, even though we didn't have it, I always look at the home language. So every student that had home language other than English, I would count them into that. But now, Emily department has been testing students, and then now it's in the system if they're considered SEI or not. So using those students, we collected their data. And what the PELI showed is that it highlighted a critical need for focused instruction and language support, as 67% of pre-kindergarten English learners are below or well below target in alphabet knowledge. And that, they're young, but also for that subgroup is low, and that makes me think of what you were just talking about. So we need to target this early on, so that doesn't happen when they go on to be older. And then the other chart that we have is in DEVILS. So the data highlights a critical need for targeted literacy and language support, as 86% of kindergarten EL students are below benchmark in letter naming fluency. That's very concerning, and that's why we decided that this is going to be our working goal for the kindergarten in this second goal. So the goal that we have for this is Of course, we're going to work in implementing targeted strategies and Tier 2 instructional supports to improve outcomes, part of those meetings that I mentioned a few minutes ago. And then our goals, they might look low, but we're trying to be working as a SMART goal, right? Something realistic, something that we can approach. But it will be at least, hopefully more. So at least we expect 50% of identified language learners to reach benchmark in alphabet knowledge in Pali. If you remember from last year, we did letter naming, which because we didn't have an official, so the letter naming will transform into the alphabet knowledge from the Pali. It's basically the same thing. The only difference is that letter naming only assess on capital letters, and alphabet knowledge is capital or small letters. Okay, and then we have 35% of identified language learners will reach core on letter naming fluency in DIBELS. So those are our goals. And the action steps, they look very similar to the ones on goal number 1, which is working on targeted scaffolding strategies, which is addressed through grade level meetings and the team meetings, because as the district has implemented the CPT this year, so that's part of their agenda, like work on these strategies and things that they need to address in order to focus on these goals. And provide Tier 2 instructional support, which is supported by our data dives and and their team meetings. We have grade level meetings every other week. So in those, we will also be looking at students as a group, and then teachers will be able to share concerns of students that they're not showing progress, and then establishing that professional collaboration to to bring more support for the students. And then we will monitor and adjust based on data, and we will be doing some fidelity checks. The document that I mentioned a few minutes ago, the Capuano Tier Interventions, that document is almost on the finalized stage, because each program presented the things that they do for Tier 1, 2, and 3. So now we're making like a compilation of that for it to be the Capuano Tier Interventions, basically, that we are supposed to see in every classroom when we visit. So from that, we're going to work on a document as a fidelity check when we visit classrooms, and we're going to establish a routine of walkthroughs to verify that these interventions are happening in the classrooms. And then, and then we will provide feedback and support to strengthen that intervention effectiveness. Slide 7. Wellness and joy. So this one you're more familiar with, because this is the measure that we used before, the SEL measure. And this is a measure that was based from the DESE SEL standards, and this is a team from Capuano that built this rubric to measure students starting at 3 years old. So this is the fall measure, and as you see, even though the data looks very similar, but there are 2 areas that we always worry about, and it reflects it because it's part of their developmental stage, right? So it's always in conflict resolution and self-management. Those are domain 2 and domain 4B, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, 4B. So those are the 2 areas that always show the lower score. So those are the areas that teachers will be focusing when they do the SEL. And this year is also a little bit easier because we have, let me go to the goal first, and then I would say that. So our Capuano goal is, that would be the previous one, still. Is at the bottom of the previous goal. Okay, yeah, so it's at the bottom. So 80% of students will demonstrate proficiency or exceed expectations in self-management. So that would be goal 2. And then for goal 4B would be 70% that will meet or exceed expectations. That means that they will be on the green. So now going to the action steps. So our first action step is the integration of SEL instruction into daily routines, which this year, as Sarah mentioned before, we have the SEL specialist position in all our buildings. So this is a teacher this year as a teacher, she's making sure she's trained in restorative justice, so she's making sure that first thing she did was a survey to see how many teachers are trained, which then we realized we have a low amount of teachers trained in restorative justice. So that's one of our sub-action steps, to make sure that all our staff is trained on that. Because we do use a lot of elements from restorative justice, such as morning circle, and so on, and the closing circle. But we need teachers to be trained on that to support that social emotional development. So with that, and that teacher also is in charge of distributing the home links. They send like a document home with what is it that we're working on second step. So families can practice with the students, and that this also serves like a link to communicate with families from the school. And then one area that, even when I was an AP, I remember when I had the other principal here presenting, they always mentioned, the AIM students, the students on the ASD diagnosed. So they do the VB-MAP. So, but then everything, I was like, what are we going to do about this? Like, they also have social-emotional development that is due. So the VB-MAP measures more verbal and development, but there's correlation. I have been doing some research, and there's correlation from the VB-MAP and the DESI standards, SEL standards. So I volunteered my BCBAs, and they're going to help me work in which are the specific areas that correlate to these two areas that we have concerns, which are standards 2 and 4B, to see which areas of the VB-MAP correlate to that, and then to make sure that the students are, developing, at their own pace, but also developing, progressively. So that's one of our action. That's one of the big action steps. Working on making a correlation with the VB-MAP into our SEL measure. And all teachers, they always, we work with little ones, so we do a lot of visual support, social stories, and behavioral reinforcement strategies. But these are more, discussed more in detail during these meetings that I mentioned when we discuss. Because when we do these tier 2 meetings, this is the way I call them, when we look at the data, we don't only look at academics, we also look at their social emotional. So sometimes there's a student that is very bright, he knows all his letters, but then he has a problem like anxiety or separation. So then that student goes also into tier 2, and then the interventions that student will receive will be SEL related, not academic. Okay? Is this slide? I'm already lost. Wait. What slide is this? 8, right? Okay. Oh, that's why I need to pass the page. Thank you very much. And this is, I put it as an action step, but even if I don't put it, this is something that we need to do. We will monitor this progress, which happens every 6 weeks, and then we will move students. There might be a student on tier 2, but then when we come after the 6 weeks, the teacher expresses it has happened, and I will give you an example. We have a student that newly comer, so he's having like a lot of anxiety and misbehaviors, so he's on our tier 2. And then after 6 weeks, it was a new student, he's learning the language, so he only needed some TLC. And then after these 6 weeks, the teacher, he's doing great now. He's like adjusting, or she, and then we move the student. So that's part of that action step 3.3. It's like monitoring constantly the development of the students and being able to move them around. Slide 9. So for family and engagement, it's a funny situation. Well, you do receive my newsletter every week, right? So you know that I send that's religious communication that I send. And I have a lot of information there because my purpose is to have parents informed. And they do appreciate it. They show it to me when they talk to me during my principal coffee hours. But there's something that always calls my attention when I was looking at different data, and it was the response rate for surveys specifically. So we found we have a mid-year survey that we do. The mid-survey year from 2023, which is the first one that you see over there, only 31% of the families responded. And I remember there was a lot of like harassment to make this happen. to make 31% of the families respond. And then the next data that we have is from the CFL, Conditions for Learning Survey. Only 13% of the families, 13.7% of the families responded. So the funny thing about this is that when you see this, you would think that these parents never come to school or participate, but this is not the case at Capuano. Capuano, I started tracking. I did not present this data today because we just had a parent-teacher conference last week, or the week before vacation, right? And then I need to come, put all that data together. But today I was looking at that, and from all our events, mentioning orientation, open house, Parent-Teacher Conference 1 and Parent-Teacher Conference 2. The least we had attendance was in this second Parent-Teacher Conference, and it was 85% of the families attended either in person or teach. I always tell my teachers to offer a Zoom option, just in case, because little ones, so sometimes they cannot just come or stay in after school, or even if they have like a phone conference, that also counts as a parent-teacher conference. So it was 85%. For our orientation, we had 97% of the families came in person to know the school and the teacher. So I had some data, and then Sam helped me to rethink this. So what we're doing, I'm focusing my principal coffee hours in working with, trying to figure out what is it that is needed for families to respond to these surveys. Like, do they need, there are different ideas that we have. So this is something that we're investigating now. So that's why we have that goal 4, that is gather insights through surveys and conversation. We will do our mid-year survey, and I will surely send a lot of communication about that through all the channels. I look like a maniac when I'm in front of the computer. Let me do talking points. Let me do Blackboard. Let me do Dojo. And then the newsletter, that's the first thing that will appear there at the beginning of every week when we do this. So right now, because this is the mid-year after February vacation, so we're preparing the version of the survey that will go out. But we're planning to add one question that specifically, what would make you, we're rethinking this in IoT, how to phrase the question. Like, what would make you answer surveys more accurately, right? And when the conditions for learning comes, because it's kind of detached from us, it's something that comes from the district. But I will have to put my hands in that too to get more answers. We also had another early childhood had a survey. Because I was taking it personal, I was like, I don't want to answer my surveys. What is this? So early childhood had a survey, and only 25 families from Capuano responded. 25 pre-K families from. We should have maybe 185 pre-K students in our building. So only 25 families responded. So that's a very low percentage. I found out that data today because I was taking it personal. I was like, why aren't they responding? So that's part of our goal. So the goal, because we have, now when we do our principals, I do a monthly principals coffee hour. So, I'm planning to bring that as a question. And also when we have one of these surveys, when they come in, I'll be like, oh, here's the code, please, before you take your coffee. So we will be doing all those things. And, we're also considering giving incentives, like gift cards from Amazon. And the PTA is willing to help us in this, because I did talk to the PTA about this. Yeah. So that's what we have for, and the action steps, yes, you're there. So enhanced communication channels, more, and this is the reason why we started, Argenciano and I started using SMORE, and now the whole district uses it, was because they're able to translate into 150 languages. It's not only the 4 target languages. We have families who are Nepali, even if they speak Esperanto, is there. I even translated to see how it looks. So, yeah. I was like, what is it, Esperanto? So, yeah. But, and this is my idea, being a language learner myself, I would have appreciated to have. I grew up in Connecticut, and there was nothing. I had to be the interpreter of my mom many times because there was nothing like Somerville is nowadays. But those are the challenges that families receive. And sometimes we can think that we are providing everything, but if the families are not seeing it, it's like it's not there. So we have to make sure that everybody knows those resources are there. And I have my final word. So that's my final word. Basically, I'm saying that our school is unique. As you can see, I was joking with my AP today. I was like, don't group us with the rest of the pre-K through 8. No, but we're a unique school. And when you go, if you ever need energy during the day, I invite any of you to come to Capuano. And I will walk you around 2 classroom stops and you will be energized. And you'll be like, I can continue my day. Because that's what we get at Capuano. You will get a lot of questions like, who are you? But these kids they always have a smile. You can see they're playing, but they're learning at the same time. And that's what I want you to have in your mind, all the data too. But, we are making our best to make sure that those kids are leaving our building, with that social-emotional development that is needed, and that they actually learn to come to school, which is one of our main goals. They learn to come to school in our building, even if they were in daycare before. Because I also have to teach parents that our school is not a daycare. So they are there to learn something. So that's also something that I very friendly remind parents, like, yes, they have to come to school. But that's what I wanted to say. You can read it later. It's very better phrase over there. But that's, our school is very unique. It's very diverse, and we are, doing the most to make sure that all those families feel welcome to Somerville. And that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll have questions and comments from my colleagues. I have Dr. Ackman, Mr. Green.
Thank you. I am very impressed with your sense of humor at 9 o'clock at night and the joy that is shining through. I'm sort of curious about, I think you called it the VB map. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious about how you landed on it.
Oh, the VB, yeah.
Is it required? Was it chosen?
The VB map is an assessment that it's done by the special education department to students who are in the ASD program.
Got it.
So that's what they had. That's what they always had. Okay. So, but like I said before, it was always like, so the AIM kids, they do the VB map. But I was like, no, but we need something more. And then that's why I started looking for, are there correlations? There are correlations. So that's why I volunteered my BCBAs to help me establishing this, so we can collect quantitative data to present to you, so you can be able to see that too.
Thank you. May I follow up? Sorry, and this is your survey suggestions. So as someone who does this a lot in my day job, having them in the room and giving them time to do it in the room, that's a solid one. And then as far as if you do incentives, research indicates that a higher value raffle, one $50 gift card instead of 5 cards tend to incentivize people more.
Thank you.
So
thank you too.
Good luck.
Have in mind, yes.
Yeah.
Mr. Green, and then Mr. Buton.
First, I just want to say, in accordance with Dr. Ackman, that between you and Ms. Wall, we have set a high threshold for joy and energy for our superintendents for our principals coming forward in these future steps. I'm impressed how you do it. And actually it ties into my question, which ties into both the beginning and end of your presentation. And you present yourself, and I hadn't thought of it this way, as the welcoming door to the district. And in light of your concerns about low rates of parent engagement, I was reminded of a conversation I had with a past Capuano PTA president several years back about how hard it was to recruit parents to be active in the Capuano PTA, in part because they're not there for very long, right? You're there for maybe 2 years and you move on, as opposed to like when my daughter leaves Healy, she'll have been there for a decade. So I think my hypothesis would be that your engagement numbers will always be lower than the district as a whole in absolute terms. But a data point I would love to have to follow, and I think this is through the district, is through your efforts, through Capuano's efforts, are Capuano parents, or Capuano alumni, I guess, more engaged in the district going forward than non-Capuano alumni,
right?
Because of that 2 years of intensive, they are the community. And I think that might be a better measure in the long term for your sense of parent engagement than trying to measure your absolute numbers in the moment, because I think in a 2-year school year, you're not going to see the same long-term engagement you see in a place where people join the PTA and other kids been there 4, 5, 6 years. But if you're teaching them, especially our, I shouldn't say teaching, if you're empowering them, if you're educating, especially groups that aren't necessarily used to, as you mentioned, the way we do schools in the United States as opposed to the way we do schools in other countries, or even other cultures in the United States. I think of my mother, who would have never been like, oh, let me go tell the teacher what I think they should do. That's just not how you do things if you're a black family in Louisiana. That may be a better way for us as a district to measure the impact of your efforts.
I'm joking. She's a data person, so yeah. Yeah, but the curiosity here is like, I cannot complain about PTA. Like the years I have been the principal that I'm directly involved with PTA, there's a bunch of parents that get involved with it. And like I said, the attendance to my activities, like even, and this is historically, like the AIM classes, like barely parents show up to parent-teacher conferences. But this year, when I visit those classrooms during parent-teacher conference, like their families there waiting. So, family engagement participation to the events, they're here. When they have the math night that we will be having, and we have the literacy day that we will have this week, most of the families in the kindergarten will show up. That's why our question came is specifically with the response rate for surveys. So we don't know if it's maybe too hard or too long. I don't know. We need to. I'm thinking another of the possibilities I forgot to say before is that we're working to have like a focus group with parents, and that's one of the specific questions that we would like to ask. Like, we would like to bring this data point, like this is the response rate from families. Why do you think, or what would you like to see, to motivate you to respond to the survey? Yeah, well, thank you.
Mr. Bichon?
Thank you, Chair, through you. Mr. Caraballo, thank you so much for this presentation. And you're right, the focus of your presentation is going to be dramatically different than anything else we will see, just by the very nature of the school and its population. So I did have an out-of-the-box idea about incentives for getting families to complete the survey. If you have 85% of the parents attending parent-teacher conferences, maybe give the ones who filled out the survey early access to sign up for preferable spots. I'm wondering how you identified the goals, the 50% for the Pelley or 35% for the Dibbles for, I think it was letter fluency, or I forget the exact.
Alphabet knowledge and letter naming fluency.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Where did those numbers come from? And I understand they're bigger than the numbers that you currently have. Are they sort of reasonable stretch goals? What was the thinking there?
So for those, because I had a question about that, I met with our data specialist and we came to those numbers. even though they seem low, but we thought they were realistic, and we don't think it's like unrealistic stretch. We think it's realistically done. It can be done, and I think I always say at least. So of course I expect more than that, but at least I would like to see that, from the start point of the fall and that will be at the during the spring. Yeah, for this year. So because the data you have here is the fall, everything is current. I can never show you data from 3 years ago because those students are already gone. They're flying away. So the data you have today, everything's from the fall, and our expectations is at the end of the year. So next year when I talk to you again, I will be able to give you like a full picture of how it went, and then any modifications that were necessary. Thank you. Okay.
Dr. Ackman?
Thank you. Through the chair, this is actually more towards the district, and this is more like inside baseball given my day job, but I understand the value of DIBELS, and there's an aspect of understanding, and there's an automaticity that is really important for kids as they are learning to read and then eventually reading to learn as they move out of Capuano. But my understanding also is that, especially like with the end of the graduation component of MCAS, and like that testing is moving away from that timed component. And I'm sort of curious, and it doesn't have to be an answer right now, but like on the value of DIBELS, especially like that timed piece and rating. I don't know how else to put, like, saying kids aren't making progress if they're not doing it in a certain amount of time, which is a strong component of DIBELS, as opposed to untimed testing where you can really see how they're learning and what they're learning, which I think is where things are going. So I'm sort of curious where the value is in DIBELS right now, and if you're thinking about that and how you're thinking about that. Does that make sense? And I've had a long time to formulate this, so you can.
So that's, if I may add,
Yeah.
that's why I have, so even though I mentioned DIBELS in our, when you look at the actual, on the slides, I have, in the outcomes, I also mentioned our letter naming data, because that is not as task-driven as the letter naming fluency, because letter naming fluency is based on time. If the student is hungry, he won't perform well, right? But the letter naming data, that's why I have internal letter naming data goals also that they will complete. And generally in letter naming data, they do better than letter naming fluency. So, and that's our basic foundational skills. They need to know the letters, right, to be able to read. So that's why I added that. I didn't mention it because, oops, I was thinking about time. But yes, it's here on the slides, and in the actual plan, it's there, the internal letter naming data. Yeah.
Thank you to the chair, and thank you for the question. I think for now, as a very quick response, we do value the DIBELS data. We value the different components of it, some of which is timed, others, as Principal Caraballo just pointed out, is not. So I would say that right now we are not thinking about kind of moving away from DIBELS overall, but that's certainly something that I can bring back to the team to discuss the different components. But I guess a simple answer is we're not, we do put a value on the assessment as valid and giving us a number of data points to move forward. It's also used as a formative assessment. So it's, it's not, it's used as an important screener. It's on a list of, as you know, approved screeners from DESE, but it's certainly not to grade or judge students. It's really to see to get data for ourselves, for our teachers, how we can best support them. So I would say, simply to simply answer the question, yes, it is still a tool that we're valuing, and it's not been a discussion about kind of moving away from in light of, MCAS and ballot question 2, as I think that's what you said there, in light of question 2. That said, that's where we are right now. Sure.
I think you also asked the question about or the time thing, like a pressure added component, but we know that there is a level of automaticity that good readers have when you approach a page and you're able to discern between a letter or a curve or a point or a tip. You know that good readers, those behaviors are automatic. So they give us a reference when a kiddo struggles to make sense of a letter, of a mark, or of a shape. Those are data points that we have to use as a corrective element. So I would say, there's a lot of time in some of the reading assessments, but I think part of that is not necessarily a shaming thing, but it's also, there is a correlation in terms of the time that a kiddo spends trying to decipher a symbol and being able to read. So that will give us a reference point. I understand the concern around the testing piece, but there is also some things that are part of the process of reading that give us a reference.
And if I may add, then, so as they have, sometimes we have had meetings that the student didn't have the best letter naming fluency, but then the teacher does not put them on tier 2 because they did better, when they did the letter naming data. But they do work. What they do, they work on the portion of the sight words, because sometimes that letter naming fluency comes from a deficiency in identifying sight words. So then they work in that with the students. So they have that that Dr. Carmona said. It's not like a shaming factor, right? But it's like an indicator of how fast the student can identify the letters. So that is something that the teacher will have into mind, maybe not to do all the full tier 2 interventions, but at least to address that fluency factor.
So one quick question or comment on the surveys. We were talking about strategies for increasing engagement. I'm just wondering if you've tried a physical paper survey sitting on the table during the parent-teacher conferences. Because I think sometimes people won't bother taking their phone and doing the scan, but if it's right there and it takes 3 seconds with a piece of paper. So
we do one like that at the beginning of the year, which is the family, I forgot what the name of it is. It's family something. But the purpose of this one is to get to know the student, right? So that one is done by paper, and that one, because the teachers provide it, and they do it more. And these others are electronic. So what we do, even though I don't have paper versions, I do the QR code, and then I put it on the table. And then, they can do that from the phone, so that's how I get them to do that. Yeah.
Okay. And then I just had a comment, which was just noting that both of the school improvement plans we saw tonight talked about common planning time. And so I'm just noticing that they were both there. You're both talking about how to utilize them well, which is exciting. And so I'm just looking forward to seeing, as you continue to talk about the plans, how those are being used, how they can be used more effectively, all of that. So it was just a comment. And are there any more questions or comments? Yes, Ms. Birch?
Related to the common planning time, I think Capuano offers an interesting perspective because school-based common planning time is essentially also grade level common planning time, because there are so many pre-K, unlike the other schools where school-based is all the grades, right?
Yeah.
And then grade level is maybe 1 or 2 other colleagues. Capuano, like when you're all together, it's all early education and mostly pre-K, right? So I think, just a comment to say, I think that it offers an interesting perspective on how our common planning time is allotted and arranged throughout the district. And I'm wondering, I don't remember who it was, but someone was, maybe it was Andre, was talking about looking at family engagement later on among families who had students at the Capuano. It may be interesting to see how, 1 or 2 or 3 years out of Capuano, how the students who were at Capuano might have been impacted differently by the way common planning time works at the Capuano, because there is so much grade level collaboration. So just something I'll be curious about going forward.
Yeah, and we also have the advantage that we have the early literacy coaches are housed in our building, so teachers can always access, that resource. And I agree with that. The only thing is that because common planning time it has different stages, so it's every certain amount of weeks when they have the common planning as a team, right? As a grade level, as a school-based team. So what I did to give some more time is to keep working on grade level meetings every other week. Because that's how we used to do the PLCs. When we started doing PLCs in our school, we did it every other week. So now they have the common planning time for their team, in which they work like team stuff. But then we have the grade level meeting in which we work some of these like tier intervention and stuff like that to try to make up for that time.
Okay. I think with that, we can say good evening to you.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Okay. Looks like we have a personnel report on the agenda as well. Is there anything you'd like to highlight for that, or anything more to your superintendent's report?
I do want to highlight some things from our personnel report. So I wanted to mention that we're gearing up for summer school postings and budget meetings, and we're continuing to hire intermittent substitutes and processing parental leave absences. So that's something that always cranks up at this time of the year. We also have some retirements. Carolyn Taylor Kennedy, a school speech-language pathologist, is retiring after 28 years. Kenneth Olson at the high school, English teacher, retiring after 32 years. Wanda McLaren at the Healy, a resource teacher, homeroom teacher, she's retiring after 37 years. Gregory Wright at the SHS and CTE, cosmetology instructor, retiring after 21 years. And Kathleen Raywood at Kennedy, a school ESL teacher, and she's retiring after 12 years. So I wanted to thank you, all these retirees, for all their years of service and dedication to our SPS system. So.
Are there any questions about the personnel report? Okay, that brings us to, we have 3 subcommittee reports to approve. I think we just do them all at once if someone wants to make a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Green, seconded by Ms. Barish. If there is no discussion, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to the resolution in support of people with disabilities in Somerville Public Schools. Mr. Vitone, would you like to read your resolution and speak to it?
I would be delighted. Thank you, Chair. If I could just start by thanking, in the spirit of partnership, the advocates with whom I shared a hand in developing this resolution, as well as input from Dr. Cremona and his staff. This resolution that's before us, and I'd be happy to read it in just a moment, came in part because of a particularly poignant letter that we received as public comment, talking about the many different lines of attack that are coming for families and students with disabilities. So I just wanted to thank those who contributed, and yes, I'd be happy to read it. Resolution in support of people with disabilities in Somerville Public Schools. Whereas Somerville Public Schools is committed to providing an inclusive, equitable, and safe environment for all students, staff, and caregivers' families, regardless of disability status, immigration status, national origin, ethnicity, race, religion, sexual orientation, sex, gender identity, socioeconomic status, or beliefs. Whereas people with disabilities may hold a variety of other identities intersecting among other groups, which can compound experiences of marginalization. Whereas Somerville is enriched by the presence of individuals with disabilities, and that the success and well-being of each member of our community is central to the well-being of the community overall. Whereas the lawsuit Texas vs. Becerra, brought by 17 states, seeks to have Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 ruled unconstitutional. which would jeopardize the rights of all people with disabilities. Whereas President Trump's Executive Order 14212, establishing the President's Make America Healthy Again Commission, frames an increase in autism spectrum disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder diagnoses as part of, quote, a dire threat to the American people and our way of life, without acknowledging the improved understanding of autism and ADHD that have arisen because of the tireless advocacy of the neurodiverse community, or the significant changes to the diagnostic criteria for ASD and ADHD that have resulted in many more people receiving these diagnoses than would have previously. Whereas the nominee for Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, has promised to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education, which plays a crucial role in monitoring states' compliance with Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and ensuring that students with disabilities receive the services and supports they need. And whereas a January 16th, 2025 report on Massachusetts' educational system from the Ed Office of Special Education Programs identified 10 findings of noncompliance with federal IDEA requirements, including in areas of dispute resolution and child find, identifying children with disabilities, which may put the state's annual $340 million budget in $340 million in federal special education funding at risk. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Somerville School Committee, 1, recommits to providing inclusive educational opportunities for all students with disabilities and ensuring access to supports and services needed for students to thrive in the educational setting. 2, will continue to engage with advocates and educators with expertise in areas of disability and its intersections with diversity, equity, and inclusion about how to better incorporate disability rights into SPS curricula to further combat stereotypes and foster empathy. And 3, will foster collaboration and partnership between SPS and organizations such as Somerville CPAC and the DESE Special Ed Department, as well as other institutions with expertise in special education, to promote best practices to identify and empower students with disabilities to access grade-level instruction and promote compliance with federal and state requirements. Somerville will lead by example in identifying and meeting the needs of students with disabilities consistent with SPS's commitment to inclusivity and excellence. Be it further resolved that copies of this resolution shall be distributed, 1, distributed to all district schools and published on the district's website, 2, sent to state and federal representatives, and 3, shared with the Somerville CPAC.
Okay, thank you for that. So our normal procedure would have this for a second reading at our next meeting, but in the spirit of the fact that we suspended our rules for the other 2 resolutions, I'm not speaking to whether we should, I just want to give it the same consideration that we gave to those other resolutions. Did you want to, yep, Mr. Pichon?
I do, and thank you, Chair, for this opportunity. In the same spirit that this, and I really welcome everyone's thoughts, in the same spirit that this was brought to us, noting that some people felt left out of the prior resolutions. And I think giving people an opportunity to review this, to weigh in and contact us if they do see anything that doesn't sit right or is missing something. As with the other resolutions where I counseled taking a pause and giving a breath, in offering this resolution, I similarly suggest taking a pause. I think it's clear that everyone, I hope, feels passionately in support of these students, but that we can go about our normal business, hear from people in the spirit of inclusivity, and then move forward through our normal course of action. So that is what I would personally counsel here, and my intention is to not put this through at the first reading. That's my thoughts. Thank you.
Yep. Are there any comments on the resolution itself or on a proposal to suspend the rules? Mr. Green?
In a time when basically every student who's not a cishet white man Christian white man is under threat, I was trying to think about however we can help any of our students. And actually to that point, I am wondering if there's more we can do in this resolution. In both the immigration and the LGBTQ plus there was an active, immediate defiance we were doing. There was a executive order on the books we were saying we were going to ignore. While I would hope that Massachusetts, and if not Massachusetts, and Somerville, eventually puts in an amicus brief against the ridiculous lawsuit, I'm curious to know what we can do in this moment in support of this, and in support of other students. I think, again, for me, the immigrant and the LGBTQ+, particularly trans and queer students, were different because there was an immediate threat, not just to their education, but to their very existence that we were responding to. But we know that they're going to come for special ed. We know they're going to come for culturally competent teaching. We know they're going to come for, again, basically everything that isn't teaching the supremacy of cishet white Christian men. So if we're going to take this time, I would love to spend it thinking of, are there things we can add to this resolution about ways in which we're going to behave in support of these students?
Okay. Are there any other comments? Ms. Pichon?
Through you, Chair. I just wanted to thank Mr. Bitone, the CPAC, everybody who's come out and done this work and brought this forward to the school committee. I really appreciate that, and I look forward to passing this. Thank you. And I appreciate Mr. Green's suggestion if there are ways that we can be more actionable and demonstrate our support. I will be thinking about that, so thank you to that as well.
Okay, if there are no further comments, this will be on our agenda at our meeting in 2 weeks for a second reading. That brings us to January bill rolls. I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve January bill rolls.
Second.
If there is no discussion, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we have some grants to accept.
I move to accept all federal entitlement and continuation grants and all state continuation grants awarded to the Somerville Public Schools listed below. A J. Lim Foundation grant of $4,000 to SHS Math and Science, and an SEF Innovation and Education grant in the amount of $500 to SHS Social Studies.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Parrish, seconded by Ms. Patone. If there's no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, that brings us to the quarterly academic update. Dr. Boston-Davis, are there any changes from the presentation you gave us last time? Okay, then I will entertain a motion to approve the...
I move to approve the recommendation of the administration for the class of 2025 competency determination.
I have a motion by Mr. Green, seconded by Dr. Ackman. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to an MSBA update. Dr. Horner, do we have any updates?
Nothing different from what I shared last time. We're still in the feasibility phase of the project. The city still continues to work on the selection of the project manager, and the city also continues to engage with members of my team as well as the school committee through the construction advisory group, and those are basically all the information that I had to share in regards to that.
Okay. Mr. Bichon?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, just a reminder that our next meeting of the School Building Facilities Subcommittee related to the MSBA topic that we have on our agenda there. So that's Monday, March 3rd at 6 p.m. Hopefully there will be more updates there. Thank you.
Okay. If there's nothing further, that brings us to items from committee members. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I skip? I did.
Oh, okay, so I'm sorry I missed out. The calendar.
Okay, yeah, well, we were not voting on it because we voted on it, right? We're just gonna, there's just an we have the calendar, the most recent version in our packet, so I will let Dr. Boston-Davis speak to that.
Thank you. Thank you to the chair. Just wanted to share with you that, first of all, thank you for approving the dates at our last meeting. So we are just sharing here first, and tomorrow we will be sending it out to the district, the finalized calendar for the 25-26 school year. We really appreciate all of the feedback. I do want to speak directly, Member Barish brought up a couple of really good points. We did try to change the colors around, but it was very hard to see when printed. We printed out a few things, so that's why we kept the red the same shade. And we also did not include the final day for seniors, though we are happy to add it in. That date can change and is often determined around the date of prom. And so because that hasn't been set, and then once they determine prom, which is often on a Thursday, they have to ensure that we have meet the required hours. So because that's not yet set, we didn't want to include that in this calendar yet. But we really appreciate that feedback and are considering it perhaps to share, at an updated version of the calendar. But the dates that the committee has approved are reflected here, and we do appreciate it. But we did want to just share with you it before we start distributing it out to the greater community. So thank you. It's just an update that it's here, and it's going to be shared tomorrow. So thank you.
Thank you for that and all your hard work on that. Okay, I think now we have items from committee members. If there's anything else, Mr. Bitton.
Thank you, Chair. Through you. Similar to how my colleague, Mr. Green, is the liaison from school committee to CPAC, I am the liaison to the ML PAC, the Multilingual Learners PAC, and I wanted to just make sure families knew about an upcoming meeting later this week on Thursday, February 27th, from 6:30 to 7:30. It has been moved to a virtual meeting for the ML PAC, and it's really an opportunity for families to share ways we can improve all of our children's learning experiences, and the meetings are open to all families in Somerville Public Schools, so just a plug for that. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. If there are, oh yes, did you, oh sorry, I'm seeing things over there. All right. If there are no other items, that brings us to condolences. Oh yes, thank you.
This is because I literally don't know, but I'm wondering, I know that there is an interim commissioner for the Department of Ed, and they're looking for another commissioner. If there's any way that Somerville families, could get involved, make their voices heard, I hope that the district is making that known as a new commissioner is chosen. I literally don't know where we are in the process, but, should you stay up to date on it, I think we have a vocal and thoughtful community, and I think we should be sharing our opinions with the board so that we can get a thoughtful commissioner who is going to be moving forward an agenda that we're in line with.
Okay. That brings us to condolences. Dr. Phillips couldn't be here this evening, so I will read our condolences. The school committee would like to extend our condolences to the families of Joan M. Shaw Coakley, wife of Paul Coakley, retired vice principal for the Powderhouse Community School, and Diane Pucci, retired Somerville Public Schools Special Education BCBA. And with that, We are adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.